So the beast in Revelation represents the worldly human powers that are controlling us in the world systems, as well as the spiritual evil behind those earthly powers, invigorating and controlling them on a spiritual level. And Jesus has a plan for both, the earthly powers and the spiritual dark forces of darkness controlling them from behind. And so today we're diving into this image of the beast and how far-reaching their influence goes. Revelation 13, 9 through 18. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Okay, so we come to this, maybe the most famous image from Revelation is the mark of the beast, and this number 666. We'll get to that. I wanted to start over here. The final 2 verses of what we looked at in the last video frames a lot of this for me, and understanding, like, we've been having this quasi-ongoing debate of whether or not the church proper is present during the book of Revelation, and I think that we are. God's people. This is a symbolic book for God's people here and now, and this is one of the reasons why. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints, God's holy people. And there's this sense that all of the calamity, the tribulation, the persecution happening throughout the book of Revelation, some of the believers are thrown into captivity, are killed with the sword, and yet they're called to be victorious. And so that just frames a lot of this for me. This is one reason why I would say this applies more as wisdom literature and a symbolic application to the church in all ages. So let's get to this beast. So we saw in the first half of chapter 13 the first beast, and it was described as one that had a mortal wound and yet was healed. Now we have another beast rising up, and this is maybe the key phrase for me. It has 2 horns like a lamb, and it speaks like a dragon. So this other beast, it has the authority of the first beast, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, again, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs. It creates an image of the beast, and the image even is animated and begins to speak. And so those who see the image worship the beast. And what's going on here? In short, we're seeing another really clear picture of what I would say is an anti-Trinity. The enemy does not come as something completely other, calling out like overt wickedness. The enemy actually comes looking like a lamb. And so this especially, the beast looks like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. And this is a key word for me. This word deceives. And who does it deceive but the people who dwell on the earth? We've brought this up before, but this phrase, dwelling on the earth, those who dwell on the earth, in Revelation does not just mean everyone who's on earth. It means the people specifically who are deceived and worship the beast. So side by side to the earth dwellers would be the people of God who receive his mark, who don't worship the beast, but are still living on the earth. I think it's a connection back to what Paul writes in Philippians of how the church we have our citizenship in heaven, even though we are still on earth. Our identity, the things that motivate us are not the things of the earth, and yet we are still here. And so here, the dwellers of the earth are the ones specifically who are being deceived by the beast. And this is I think, a good challenging word for all of us in any age to say, okay, are there voices in our world that feel so much like what we would expect to hear from God? Do they look like a lamb? And we don't have the understanding to realize that they're actually speaking like a dragon. They're performing signs. They look like this beast dies and rises again. It has authority. It makes fire come. It does miracles. It looks like a lamb. And sadly, more and more people are being deceived by this anti-Trinity. The two beasts and the image stand in contrast to God himself, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And so the way that the anti-Trinity comes is to deceive those who dwell on the earth by setting up a distorted parallel of the goodness of God himself. So let's get to the number. I've actually changed my understanding of this over the years. My initial thought, and I'll show this, although this gets a little too much into code breaking, which we've been saying throughout. John writes in symbol, not code. But I'll throw it out anyway, because most people know this one, but that 666, a lot of scholars and commentaries will say the most obvious connection is to Nero, Caesar himself. Two reasons why. The numbers themselves, there's a practice in ancient Judaism of turning numbers into letters and adding them up, and if you add up different configurations of Nero, Caesar, it adds up to 666. Another one, Nero was insane, and he did enact on a small scale some really bad persecution of Christians. He lit Christians on fire to light his dinner parties, for instance. He was a really bad guy and a definite enemy to the church. So it would make sense that people would be afraid of Nero. There was also a legend that when Nero died, he didn't actually die, but was going to come back with even greater persecution. And so there was this feeling in the first century, if you were to put a boogeyman out there, it would have been Nero. And so that makes kind of sense that Nero might be the first connection to this number 666. If it was, I would actually take even that more symbolically. I don't think that John would have thought that Nero was actually coming back from the dead, but that someone like Nero was coming. Okay, so that all makes sense. I was in that camp for a while. Actually, the commentator G.K. Beale, who is in the show notes, kind of put me onto another way and kind of taking this even more symbolically. But 666, well, that's actually more of like the number of humanity. 6 would be where 7, as the 7 days of creation, would be this number for completeness. It would have been more of a holy number because it's more connected with God and with the divine. Well, 6 is the day that Adam was created. It's the number of humanity, and it's just one less than complete. And so it's a little distorted. It's a little less than what optimal. And then coming 666 altogether actually connects even better with what we just talked about, this anti-Trinity. You have the beast and the second beast and the image, and they look like a lamb, but they're speaking like a dragon. And then you have this incomplete number 3 times, 666. And so symbolically then, this kind of connects really well with this idea that the enemy is putting forth this anti-Trinitarian, distorted parallel of the truth and calling people to worship it. And so I think more and more, if I were to say it's a specific person, it's probably Nero. If not, then this symbolic idea that it's the number of man. One last observation on that. The Greek here, you actually don't need this article a, for it is the number of man, or the number of humanity. There's no definite article the. If it was a specific man, in Greek you would normally add that article the. And so actually the way that it's even written, it makes just as much sense to read it in Greek, for it is the number of humanity. And that number is 666. So the number of incompleteness, of less than divine, of this anti-Trinity is the number 666.